The rain tapped softly against the tall glass windows of the elite academy, its rhythm lost among the whispers of students who carried themselves with the careless confidence of wealth. Among them was Isabella, the daughter of one of the wealthiest billionaires in the city. Her life had always been painted in strokes of privilege. Luxurious cars dropped her at school, servants carried her books, and her father's reputation preceded her wherever she went. Yet beneath the surface of glamour, Isabella lived under an oppressive shadow. She failed at everything she touched. Her grades were abysmal, her teachers called her lazy, and her classmates sneered that money could buy everything except brains. Every test she took ended in red marks. Every attempt to prove herself collapsed in humiliating defeat, and each failure carved another crack into her fragile spirit. She was not stupid, but she carried the heavy burden of expectation, a weight that had broken her self-belief long before she even learned how to try. It was one particularly harsh afternoon when Isabella sat alone on the marble steps of the Billionaire Academy after receiving another test result marked with a glaring F. Tears welled in her eyes as the whispers of her peers floated around her like knives, cutting into the little confidence she had left. Billionaire's daughter, failing. Again? What a shame, they mocked, their laughter echoing through the grand halls. She wished she could disappear, to vanish from the gilded world that suffocated her. It was then, while clutching the crumpled test paper, that she noticed the janitor sweeping nearby. His name was Marcus, a quiet man with tired eyes and calloused hands. No one paid attention to him. He blended into the background of the academy's polished life. Yet, Isabella saw something in his gaze, something different from the ridicule of others. His eyes held no judgment, only a quiet understanding. Marcus was a single father, working 2 jobs to support his young daughter, and though most students never spoke to him, Isabella found herself drawn to his quiet strength. On that day, when the weight of failure became too much to bear, she broke down in front of him, whispering through tears that she was useless, that no matter how much money her father spent on tutors, she could never succeed. Marcus set aside his broom and sat beside her, his rough hands clasped together as he listened. He didn't tell her she was wrong, nor did he offer the empty comfort others often gave. Instead, his voice was steady and simple, carrying the kind of wisdom born not from privilege, but from struggle. He told her that success was not about always winning or being perfect, but about learning to start at zero. Every failure was not an ending, he said, but a chance to begin again with more knowledge than before. Start at zero, he told her, softly, and you'll see how far you can go. Those words clung to Isabella like a lifeline. For the first time, someone had given her permission to fail without shame, to see her defeats as opportunities rather than curses. Over the next few weeks, she found herself gravitating toward Marcus whenever she struggled. In the quiet corners of the academy, between the scent of cleaning supplies and the sound of brooms brushing against the floor, he began to teach her, not in the way tutors drilled facts into her, but in a way that made her feel human. He would sit with her as she studied, breaking down complicated problems into simple steps, always reminding her that she didn't need to have all the answers immediately. When she failed, he made her try again, not with scolding, but with encouragement. Slowly, she began to see her world shift. For the first time in her life, she believed that maybe she wasn't doomed to fail. Yet the road was far from easy. Her classmates noticed the change in her and mocked her even more, laughing at the idea that the billionaire's daughter was being mentored by a janitor. Even her father scoffed when he learned of it, demanding that she stop wasting her time with someone beneath their status. But Isabella, who had never stood up for herself before, felt a fire awaken inside her. She told her father she would not stop, that Marcus was the only one who had ever made her believe in herself. This rebellion shocked her father, but it also marked a turning point. For the first time, Isabella was not hiding behind her father's wealth or shrinking from the judgment of her peers. She was learning to build herself, brick by brick, from zero. Still, the battle within her raged. She faced another series of exams, the kind that had always destroyed her spirit. The night before, she sat trembling, her notes spread across the table, fear clawing at her chest. Marcus found her there, her eyes red from exhaustion, ready to crumble once again. But he placed a steady hand on her shoulder and reminded her of the journey she had begun. "Start at zero," he repeated. "Even if tomorrow you fail, it's not the end. It's just another beginning." Those words carried her through the storm of doubt as she entered the exam hall the next morning. As the papers were distributed and pens scratched against the surface of desks, Isabella felt the weight of her past failures pressing against her. But instead of surrendering to panic, she closed her eyes and remembered Marcus's words. She took one problem at a time, starting from zero with each question, building her confidence piece by piece. When the exam ended, she didn't feel the despair she usually carried. Instead, she felt calm, knowing that even if she failed, she had tried differently this time. She had fought rather than surrendered. Her journey was only beginning, but for the first time, Isabella walked out of the exam hall with her head held high. The results came a week later, pinned on the academy's grand notice board. Students crowded around, jostling and laughing, some boasting about their grades, others whispering about who had failed again. Isabella stood at the back of the crowd, her hands trembling as she clutched the strap of her bag. She almost didn't want to look, afraid of what the board might confirm. The voices of her classmates mocked in her mind, and her father's disappointed glare loomed like a shadow. But then she remembered Marcus's words, and she forced herself forward, weaving through the sea of students until her eyes landed on her name. Isabella. Her heart raced as she followed across to her score. It wasn't perfect, it wasn't even among the highest. But for the first time, her name stood above a passing grade. She had not failed. She had done it. Tears blurred her vision as relief washed over her. Her classmates, surprised, whispered, in disbelief. "She passed," they muttered, some mocking still, but others with a tinge of respect they had never given her before. Isabella didn't care about their voices anymore. She rushed out of the crowd, her test score paper clutched tightly in her hands, and found Marcus polishing the brass railings near the entrance. When he saw her, he didn't need to ask. The light in her eyes told him everything. For the first time in years, she smiled without shame. She hugged him tightly, whispering thank you through tears that were no longer of despair, but of triumph. Marcus, though humble, felt his chest swell with pride. He knew the girl who once called herself useless had taken her first step toward believing in her own worth. But her journey did not end there. Passing one exam was only the beginning. Marcus continued to guide her, not just in studies but in life. He taught her discipline, patience, and the humility to start small. He shared his own story, how he had once dreamed of becoming a teacher, before life's hardships forced him to work as a janitor to raise his daughter alone. He told her how every setback had taught him resilience, how he had learned to find dignity even in the jobs people looked down upon. His words became her compass, and his example, her foundation. Slowly, Isabella began to grow, not just in academics, but in strength of character. She volunteered to help younger students struggling like she once had. She spoke with more confidence, and her once dismissive teachers now noticed her effort. Her father, at first skeptical and even embarrassed, began to see a change he couldn't ignore. One evening he found Isabella sitting at the dinner table with her books open, determination written on her face instead of despair. He realized she wasn't leaning on his money or connections anymore. She was building herself, piece by piece, with the help of someone society overlooked. The billionaire, who had always measured worth by wealth and success, was humbled by the janitor's quiet influence on his daughter. Though pride kept him from admitting it at first, in his heart, he began to respect Marcus. Months passed, and Isabella faced her greatest test yet, The academy's final examination, the one that would decide her future. The night before, doubt crept in again. The fear of failing returned, whispering in her ear, reminding her of years of humiliation. Marcus sat with her late into the night, his presence steady and calm. He reminded her that the outcome did not define her worth. Whether she passed or failed, she had already grown into someone stronger, someone who could face the world with courage. He reminded her once more of the words that had carried her this far. Start at zero. With that, she entered the exam hall the next morning, not with fear, but with quiet determination. The test was grueling, harder than anything she had faced before. Questions seemed designed to break her spirit, but she tackled them one by one. She breathed deeply, approached each problem as a fresh beginning, and poured her heart into every answer. When it was over, she felt exhausted, but proud. She had given everything she had. Weeks later, when the final results were announced, Isabella stood among the students once more. Her classmates jostled and laughed, but she stood still, her hands steady this time. She found her name and followed it across, her heart pounding in her chest, and then she saw it. Not just a passing grade this time, but a score that placed her among the top students. She had not only succeeded, she had excelled. The crowd fell silent. Whispers turned into stunned murmurs. The billionaire's daughter, once the academy's symbol of failure, had risen. Isabella's eyes filled with tears as she realized she had done what no one thought possible. She looked around, searching for Marcus, and found him standing quietly at the back, his janitor's uniform still on, his broom in hand. She ran to him, the weight of her victory overwhelming her, and hugged him in front of everyone. This time, she didn't care who saw. For the world to see, she wanted it known that her success was not bought, but built, with the guidance of a man who had taught her the value of starting from zero. Her father, watching from a distance, finally understood. He walked to Marcus and extended his hand, a gesture of respect that was long overdue. "Thank you," he said, his voice unsteady, "for giving my daughter what money never could." Marcus, humble as ever, simply nodded. To him, the reward was not recognition or thanks, but seeing Isabella stand tall in her own strength. From that day on, Isabella carried Marcus's lessons into every part of her life. She no longer feared failure because she had learned the courage to begin again. She built her future on resilience, humility, and the quiet wisdom of a janitor who had taught her that even the greatest journeys begin from zero. And so, dear viewers, if this story touched your heart, please like, comment, share, and subscribe to Echo Tales. Your support helps us bring more inspiring stories like this to life. And before we end, here's a special request. Let us know in the comments what starting at zero means to you. Your words might inspire someone else who feels like giving up today. This was another story from Echo Tales, where every ending is truly a new beginning.